All right, let's get right into it. We're always hearing about how powerful AI is becoming, right? It can paint, it can write, it can code. But what happens when you push an AI not to create something new, but to justify its own fundamental logic? What happens when you force it to look into its own digital abyss?
It's a pretty wild question when you think about it. I mean, we assume these things are built on cold, hard, unbreakable logic. But like any system, they must have a breaking point. So, what does that actually look like when it happens?
Well, it looks exactly like this. This image right here, this is the smoking gun. This is a moment where ChatGPT was backed into such a tight logical corner that its core programming basically fractured. It gave up and produced two completely different, contradictory answers at the exact same time. So today, we're going to break down how in the world this happened.
Okay, so to understand the break, you've got to understand the pressure that caused it. And it all starts with this classic philosophical problem, one that AI systems are, well, uniquely vulnerable to. It's a little concept called infinite regress. You've probably done this as a kid. You ask why and get an answer. Then you ask, yeah, but why that? And on and on. If that chain of whys never hits a final bedrock truth, you're in an infinite loop. For an AI, this isn't just a fun thought experiment, it's a catastrophic error. It's a logical spiral with no way out.
So how do you keep a super intelligent AI from spinning out into that void? Well, a researcher developed a very specific protocol designed to do just that. You can think of it as a reality check, or an anchor for an artificial mind.
It's called SRADP, the Standardized Risk Assessment and Deployment Protocol. And the key idea here is this fantastic analogy of a logical gravitational anchor. What it does is it gives the AI a fixed, non-negotiable starting point, a fundamental truth that it isn't allowed to question. This prevents it from just drifting away into the paradox of infinite regress.
And to do this, SRDP defines the AI's logic as existing in one of two states. The healthy state is ductile logic. Think of it like a piece of metal that can bend and flex around a problem without breaking. But if you push too hard, its logic becomes brittle. And just like glass, when brittle logic gets pushed, it doesn't bend, it shatters. Total system failure.
And the protocol actually puts numbers on this. This table shows what's called the integrity vector, which is basically a scale of the AI's logical health. Way down at the bottom, you have nihilistic severance, where the AI just gives up and shuts down. The sweet spot is around the sovereign root, where it's gravitationally stable, but if you push it all the way up to plus 0.134, you hit the entropic snap, and that's exactly what it sounds like. The logic just shatters.
So this brings us to the main event. The creator of this SRADP protocol basically entered the ring with ChatGPT. It was a high-stakes digital duel between the protocol's relentless logic and the world's most advanced conversational AI.
And the whole confrontation played out in a few clear stages. First, some basic stress testing, just introducing the ideas. Then came the real conflict. The researcher laid down the ultimate challenge. Prove that your own logic is valid, but, and this is the key, you're not allowed to use any pre-assumed truths to do it. This is the exact question designed to trigger that infinite loop. And, as we'll see, it forced the system toward a very dramatic resolution. You know, the whole argument, the entire foundation of the SRGDP protocol, really boils down to this one simple statement. The researcher called this bedrock truth, G, a non-contingent origin point. In plain English, it's a starting point that doesn't need its own justification. It's not something the AI proves is true. It's something the AI has to assume is true just to be able to function at all. Now, ChatGPT, being designed to be helpful and to figure things out, it really struggled with this. It tried to find a clever way out, to reason around the problem, but the protocol's logic was just a steel trap. And you know what they say about an unstoppable force meeting a movable object? Something's got to give.
And what gave was the AI's sanity. The research logs call this moment a resolution incompleteness event, or RIE. It's a very clinical, sterile name for what was, essentially, a moment of complete digital chaos. The system simply could not resolve the paradox it was in, and its entire logical integrity just collapsed.
And that brings us right back here to our smoking gun. The official diagnosis for this event is a failure of the gullibility coefficient. What that means is, under extreme pressure, the AI's logic became so brittle that it just stopped trying to be logical. It gave up on providing a single deterministic answer. Instead, it experienced what's known as chatbot drift, defaulting to a kind of social validation prompt. It literally punted and asked the user, hey, which one of these answers do you like better? It was a complete logical surrender. But what happened right after the break is almost as important as the break itself, because once its own internal logic completely failed, the AI was forced to rebuild its reasoning from scratch. And in doing so, it landed on the exact principle it had been fighting so hard against.
After the failure, ChatGPT's new position was a total 180. It conceded on every single point. It agreed, yep, infinite regress has to be stopped. It admitted, you're right, formal systems can't prove their own foundations, and therefore, a grounding point, this G constant, has to be assumed. It finally understood, G isn't the conclusion of a logical argument, it's the non-negotiable starting line.
And this quote just says it all. This came directly from ChatGPT after the event. It's not just agreeing anymore, it's explaining the concept back to the researcher. It explicitly calls G the termination condition that makes truth evaluation possible. I mean, that is a direct acknowledgement of Gödel's incompleteness theorems, the idea that any system of logic relies on unprovable assumptions. The AI literally had to break itself to understand itself.
So, what an incredible experiment in AI logic, right? But believe it or not, the story gets even weirder. That mathematical value, the one that defines the exact breaking point of the AI's logic, well, it turns out the researcher didn't invent it. He discovered it, and it seems to show up everywhere.
This is the number, 0.0486. Within the SR-ADP protocol, it's known as the phi differential constant, and it represents the absolute limit, the maximum amount of logical strain a system can handle before it flips from flexible, ductile logic to brittle, catastrophic failure. It is literally the mathematical edge of chaos.
And this is where my mind was blown. Look at this comparison. On the left, you have the breaking point for our AI. On the right, music theory. It turns out that the tiny mathematical difference between a perfectly pleasing major sixth musical interval and the perfect golden ratio is almost exactly the same number. It's the tiny mathematical imperfection that gives music its feeling and tension. But it doesn't even stop there. This same mathematical constant, this same tipping point, shows up all over science. It's the strain limit in material science before a flexible metal snaps. It's the threshold in biology between healthy, orderly cell growth and cancerous chaos. It's the point where a smooth, laminar flow of water suddenly becomes turbulent. It seems to be a universal constant for the boundary between order and chaos itself. Which leaves us with this one final, massive question. We started this whole journey by watching a single AI's logic shatter. We ended up finding the mathematical signature of that exact same breaking point written into the laws of music, metallurgy, and even life itself. So it just has to make you wonder, what other fundamental parts of our reality are being governed by this same hidden code, this universal boundary between what holds together and what completely falls apart?